All right, NG3. So back to when I was talking about Maya, I was talking about basically how Maya is an illusion. What I mean by that again is just a quick rundown for this video is that nothing that we see is a solid object and is composed of multiple different organisms, cells, molecules, objects, and things to create it. Like if you necessarily look at your body has multiple different systems that is on top of you that you reap the benefits for. If you look at my clothes that I'm wearing right now, these are multiple different fibers wove together to create a solid substance. But then you have to also remember, where do all of these substances originate from? From my perception, all of these have been transformed from one state of matter to the next. So if you look at the human body necessarily, you were transformed from a sperm cell and an egg into this thing here, meaning that, and essentially, you are both of your parents' bodies fused as one thing. I would like to look at it as you're your father's soul and you're your mother's body necessarily. That's why when you feel sick and things like that, you reach for comfort or physical comfort by reaching out to your mom if you have a good connection with your mom or an ideal connection. And that's why when you need things of like determination or extreme self-reflection or motivation, guidance to a degree, is supposed to be something of your father. But this doesn't mean that these things are separate from each individual parent. No, they both are supposed to embody these things. But I just say by nature, these things kind of supposed to happen like that, or the higher nature that we human beings are supposed to embody. So, back to what I was necessarily saying about Maya and illusion. So, with everything around you being necessarily in degree an illusion, meaning that you can break it down and it's composed of a bunch of smaller individual molecules, those molecules were then composed of something before that. So all of our inventions and everything like that is composed of the aspect of destroying matter, reconfiguring it, and transforming it to something else. So just because I have a wooden desk, that doesn't mean the tree that it grew from didn't exist. I just modified that tree, killed it, and transformed it to another thing. That's still a tree. Its identity has just been changed, but the matter of what the thing is has just been transformed and fused with something else. So when I look at the concept of Pluto and everything like that, in astrology, Pluto would be considered your background, but how the way I view it from, me just basically daydreaming, thinking, and, all those things of the sort, is that Pluto is basically the dead. Pluto is the name of the Roman god of the dead, but I believe that what the dead is not what we think it is. It's not the spooky stuff, it's not the horrific things, it's not all of that scary shit. Like, it is spirits, but I believe we have a misconfiguration of what those things are. I believe games like Death Stranding are so interesting because they give a completely different concept of what death is. But everything in life is based off of pattern, and this is going to play a very, very big role in what I'm saying now. So meaning that everything you necessarily do, you do over and over and over again through repetition. When you do those things through repetition, they start to manifest in a certain thing. So if you want muscles, you work out over and over and over again, and you do the things that help build your muscle, and then those become a permanent thing that you have muscles. If you want to become smart, then you basically study, and you study in the way that you retain information, and then those things would then become permanent inside of your mind. If you want experience, you have to go out and do things to actually figure those things out, and then that experience then translates to wisdom because you can actually see how it worked in your everyday life. So if everything is based upon something that came before it, or everything is based upon the whole concept of all of these weird different little things interacting with necessarily you in the world of Maya or the world of illusion, all of these individual worlds unify with each other to create the reality that we know, and we reap the benefits of experience this through our self-awareness of looking at everything as a whole. But in reality, everything is not a whole at all. Another thing what we could say about that as well is that we are not a solid individual. So if we're composed of so many different things, and all of these things have been passed on from the concept of time, meaning that all of our ancestors have done so many different patterns of behavior that they've activated certain DNA frequencies or certain DNA codons that have been passed down and that we experience now, like the way that you look, like your facial structure and all of those things. You can change those things with extreme modification, but nine times out of ten, your facial structure come from from your DNA, and your DNA is unlocked based on what patterns and what behaviors your parents had before you. Whether if they ate healthy, did they have a healthy body from doing healthy things? Were they born more fortunate necessarily? And I don't mean fortunate as not as money wise, but were they born with any genetic abnormalities or any things like that that kind of hurts people, or that can cripple them in the long run, or at least cripple them through the concept of survival. Because I believe that everybody can exist here, but everybody has to have a sense of equity and just pick up where other people lack off. And I might not even say that word correctly, but that's how the way I perceive it. Um, so going back to what I was saying with the world of Maya, is that all of these things that exist here are basically constellatory things that we give an identity to, but then all of those things have their own individual world that they went about to create them, which you can see under microscopes, you can study, you can see the natures of. Everything has a different world of reality. So going back to what the dead is that everything that came before you had a certain pattern that activated all of the things that you had before you were born. So a lot of the times I personally believe that when you get into certain predicaments and certain things like that, the whole concept of ritual happens, where things that happen to your ancestors happen to them so strong that it has such an effect on you now that it activates a gene that they had back then. Like trauma changes the brain, trauma does all of these things. The whole concept of Pluto or the dead and everything like that is the whole concept of transformation. But you have to remember, you have to keep that concept as vague as possible to understand what this thing really is. It is basically the transformative thing. It's the transformative permanence that has always been here, and the influence that it has on the things that are here now. Meaning that time is relative. So our time is not the same as an animal's time, and is not the same as a plant's time. But through our perception, we can view those things as that, but then we categorize those things based on the experience of how long they lived. So we say that basically, this doesn't live as long as us, or this doesn't live as long as us, or this doesn't live as long as us. But who isn't to say that their worlds are completely different? Even though we perceive that it doesn't live longer than us, who isn't to say that its version of time is experienced way different than us? Like kind of like when you're being at work and you're, in a sense, waiting to get off, and you're looking at the clock, and the clock just slows the fuck down even more and more and more. Because your focus is necessarily on that, time kind of slows down because you're, in a sense, participating in the concept of time based on your focus. It's like the human brain is crazy, so it's like time is not truly slowing down, but your perception of it is slowing down. Thus, your experience of things is slowing down. So going back to the dead again, everybody has things that they focus on. When they focus on these certain things, you put more energy onto something, that thing kind of releases a stain, or that thing kind of incubates and creates a seed. So that seed is basically the offspring of the dead. What I mean by the dead is that when you keep going, when you look at who you are, your body was your mother's. A lot of times your facial structures and the way you look comes from either your mom or dad, or the fusion of both. So you can bet that basically the way they look come from their parents, and the way they look come from their parents. At some point in time, these people are dead. So when you keep that in necessarily mind, you start to realize the dead is just not the descended ghost, but it's the very things that make you up, that are experienced through you when you're in certain scenarios or situations. And everybody has a sense of death, or everybody has a sense of the dead. Hence in the Bible, when it talks about the whole concept of a demon, talks about we are legion. So us being human beings, we have such an awareness that we can experience so many different realities. And what I mean by that is that we can just have a certain sense of empathy, and we can superimpose and imagine ourselves being into something else, and gain information by this, just the mind's eye of imagination. So using that and the concept of the dead and everything like that, the dead would be a way of looking at basically the dead through regular people, would be people who kind of don't have imagination, are just solely focused on survival, and they're willing to commit any atrocity just to survive. And that's not necessarily an evil thing, but essentially it's just the body's defense mechanisms. And all of the body's defense mechanisms are given from repetitive behavior based on outside stimuli. So in a sense, the Pluto energy is an animalistic energy of just all that came before you. So you have to remember, we lived as animals at some point in time. Us living as animals at some point in time, we still have those impulses. So now you look at the concept of slavery. The concept of slavery is not even treating someone as a human being. That's revoking their entire right to make a choice or to live their life, and basically treating them less as an animal or a slaughter or a plaything. So when you treat them as that, those impulses that happen when we were animals from long ago, they also begin to activate. When they necessarily activate, we start embodying animalistic behavior because we lose a sense of self and we only focus on identity. Well, we lose our identity or our sense of self. We only focus on survival, meaning we will do anything to survive. If someone puts a gun to us and everything like that, we won't try to talk our way out of it. We'll just try to run, fight, or basically try to recreate his behavior to do that. So energetically, in the abstract function of Pluto or the gods of the dead and everything like that, is just all of the things that are stored within us that get activated based on ritual. And ritual would basically be when things are all lined up and the same experience that somebody in your past, that one of your ancestors has had, that is so powerful, it breaks through and it creates that pattern in today's world. So more so it'll be like this. A plutonic aspect would be when you can't think of the future, so you only basically think of getting your primal needs necessarily met. So it would be like this. As you're growing up, you have an inherent sense of self based on all the things that were given to you from your parents through your genes and all the experiences that they gave towards you. So all of those things converge and they give you a sense of identity, or they give you an idea of an identity that you then take and you then try to recreate into the world. But when the world doesn't allow that, that becomes traumatic, and then you have to adjust your behavior based on that concept of survival. Now, the human brain cannot decipher what's really going on, how the way you think and your feelings all in the same thing. It registers all of that shit as the same threat, and it activates the body's defense mechanism. That's why when you're about to get broken up with, you have the same, your heart races as if a lion's about to fucking eat you. But it's just basically someone's breaking up with you. A former version of you as getting ready to die. Hence Pluto again, when I'm going back to the dead. So it's all of these aspects of these things that once were here that deceased passed on, or they activated on some type of ritual and transformed. So it's all the stuff that no longer is here, but its virtue is still expressed through, I wouldn't necessarily say the evolution or its offspring, and not offspring by just a biological concept, but necessarily the thing that basically comes out of it from the aspect of taking it and reconfiguring it and rechanging it. Like, for example, a sperm cell is basically a genetic line that is then given into a woman's body, and then her body reconfigures that genetic line with her genetic line and then produces a baby after she clothes it in her own matter. So it's basically like all of the emotions and all of those fears and all of those experiences are stored within our genes, and they are expressed based on the same experiences that we experience within this world. Just like basically, like, you can say cooking is an aspect, is a plutonic aspect, meaning it's the aspect of taking multiple things that have their own identity, throwing them into a pot, destroying them, reconfiguring, or killing and transforming them into something completely new, and then that new dish has its own identity of what it is. So this is not necessarily, this wouldn't be necessarily steak. This is filet mignon after it's cooked. Or this wouldn't necessarily be apple bread and sweet stuff. This is an apple pie, because all of those are fused. So a plutonic way of looking at what basically the dead and everything is that it's that inherent virtue that is passed on and fused with today's world and continuously passed on through something else. So essentially it's more so a sense of like a reincarnation of what something is once everything is fused together. Now, how does that have to do with personality? So it has to do a lot with personality in different ways. because we are in a sense made up of different cells and different things that make us, right? So you can just keep going all the way down to us being an energetic thing, where different things that are fused together that are created into this world. So we're all of these things. Why isn't to say that we are also, as the individual body of what we are, a cell of something much greater that we cannot comprehend? But who is it to say that that thing is always good or bad? Now, in the Bible, it talks about basically let the dead lead the dead and everything like that. And I believe what that means is that people that are solely focused on animalistic impulses and survival, or all of the things that their parents told them that was scary, and they readjusted all of the inherent virtues and good things about themselves, they thrown that away and adopted all of these nasty defense mechanisms because they let their experiences or their environment or their habitat change who they were, which was evolution, which was kind of pressed, which came out around the same time, I believe, that they discovered the planet Pluto. So back to what Pluto is and everything like that, because I can be wrong, I could just be blabbering, but back to what Pluto is and everything. This concept and everything, I believe the planet was named after that because in the Kuiper Belt there are little things called Plutinos. These things are not able to be planets, and they're very, very small, and Pluto is considered necessarily a Plutino, and it goes between Plutino, dwarf planet, and planet, which was originally a planet. So Pluto had his identity of planet stripped away, and then it basically became associated with the group of lesser things. So in a sense, it became basically a background thing, kinda, and I believe that's what it represents in your birth chart. It represents your background, or all the things that make up who you are, and those things are biology, their personality, they are your experiences, they are all of the things necessarily that were given to you, the gifts and all of the stuff, because that's another thing. With the dead comes gifts and all of those things, meaning that all of the fusion of everything, or the fusion of all the flavors inside of a dish, create a certain flavor that you can't get unless you fuse all of those things together. So it creates a whole new identity that is once a part of. So egregores, or you can say groupthink, or personalities that are created when a bunch of people get together that have like-minded energies and they do like-minded things. These personalities, in a sense, completely take the individuality away from people and completely possess and govern us. How you can see that now, all of the people that voted for Trump, and all the people that basically go to war, all these people that are willing to kill just for the sake of survival, all these people that are willing to do all of the shit that they would not want someone to do to them, period. It's all a state of animalistic sense of, I have no ability to truly self-reflect and see myself in other people, so I look at everybody as a force of nature which I absorb and consume, bring into myself, and become one with, which again is a Plutonic thing if you look at the whole concept of Pluto. So what basically Pluto is, from what I've seen and how the way it interacts with Maya, is that Pluto is the god of the dead and is the god of transformation. These things will always have a precedent over your personality, meaning that all of your experiences, all of the things you went through, all of the things that your parents taught you, all of the shit your parents did to you, all of the trauma, all of those things that change the very core of who you are mentally, that caused you to change necessarily your own bodily structure a lot of the times, all of those things are not who you are. That is just a reaction to what you are, and a lot of times we believe that, and then we just focus on just trying to present those little aspects of our personality rather than looking at the whole awareness identity of what we are, or the individual thing. For example, it's like we're not even our namesakes. Our namesakes is a Plutonic thing, meaning that's just the identity our mom gave to us, which is not an evil thing, but it's like this moral world that we live in doesn't want to understand these concepts to deal with them. They just want to label things good, bad, so they can destroy and act on their own Plutonic animalistic impulse. Basically a hedonistic one. You have to remember what we get the dopamine from. The dopamine, first and foremost, is a survival mechanism, meaning that all of the things that necessarily keep you alive make you happy. And then when we get into a world of convenience, the human brain cannot decipher past, present, future, mental, emotional, and physical things. So the feeling of discomfort is also a threat. So when we get into a state of convenience from survival and everything like that, we look for things to make us necessarily happy or for us to get just the dopamine. So we start doing things and then we do things that are targeted simply for just the dopamine. So when that necessarily happens, damn, I lost myself. Back to what I was saying is that dopamine is a survival mechanism, meaning that the whole reason what we're doing is to stay alive. We get that confused and thinking that, happy is thinking that us feeling positive and us getting a jolt of happiness to recreate and do something is supposed to be the meaning of why we're here. Now, this is where we get confused at. Happiness is basically determined by patternistic behavior, meaning that addiction is basically you doing a pattern that helps relieve stress and anxiety or the feeling of you need to survive. Once you keep doing that pattern to relieve that pattern becomes a habit or a habitat. Once you recreate that within yourself, that thing then starts governing you necessarily, and then you become a Plutino, or you become a cell or a part of whatever that giant, or you become a part of the dead that only live to get that physically bodily response. Now, it's not to say that everybody that has a habit, everyone that has basically a habit is fucked up or evil or anything like that, but no, it's to try to tell you the nature of pattern. So the nature of pattern is not what we think it is. The nature of pattern is doing these things over and over again, and they get passed on. So in a sense, the dead is not even the spirits of the dead. It is the virtue of what they are that is expressed through you and expressed through all of the things, nature, creation, and existence itself. So meaning that all of the laws of creation and nature from long ago, they still apply to you in every single way, shape, or form. Meaning that they may not apply in the same way that we perceive it, because we don't perceive the world that we are all selves. We perceive the world as we are individuals and identities and things that are going about the world. We don't look at we're a part of other things that, in a sense, we can just be the cellular nature of something else, and we just don't experience the world through cellular nature. We just experience it through information or through our own personal bias, meaning that we could be just like coral, one thing having separate experiences, but we all have the same exact natures that come out in different patterns and in different behaviors. Hence the whole concept that we all are one. If you can look, you can Google life on Wikipedia. Is basically we all come back from the same organism. If we come back the same organism, then we all go back from the same concept. And that concept can be so vague that we can't even know what it is. We'll just always find an offshoot or a branch of it, which is another Plutonic thing. So Pluto in astrology governs Scorpio, which is the sign of transformation and discipline. So I can understand that is because these things are so sensitive, or these people, Scorpios, are so sensitive that Scorpios are so sensitive that they take in the environment of them around them, and they can make that part of their identity, or they fuse all of the things around them, and they express or they feel those things at times. Hence, being a water sign that feels so deeply, it can become scary, because ancient shit could come out of them that they have no idea that is actually in them, based on the ritual concept of being placed in a certain environment. Meaning that your environments that you're placed in, they bring out things that are not you, but these things are meant to keep you alive. So these dead concepts, you have to be able to govern them and see when you're supposed to apply those things, because a lot of times they can come out in relationships and things like that and actually damage the person that you love, because they become a reflection of who you are, and then they become part of you. And if you do not like yourself, those different individual ancestral things that are inside of you, they'll react towards that. Meaning your patterns and your behaviors and things like that, they won't give you energy to do things that motivate you to do better, but they'll give you energy to degenerate. Hence degenerate. You go back a generation, you keep going back, you'll start to realize you'll start to lose brain faculties, because you'll start to essentially come towards an animal that's only based on its habitat. But it's getting late, I gotta get to work, so I'm probably might make a part 2 about Pluto. Good night, and y'all guys have a great one.